Okay. All right, let's get going. So hello everyone, my name is Steven, and welcome to the webinar brought to you by Pravada. Today's webinar is about the difference between estate planning and legacy planning and why it's important in today's economic climate. Today's presenter is John Oliver. John is the Vice President of Field Development at Transamerica, and I'm going to hand the mic over to John so we can get this thing started. John, you ready?
Yes, sure am. Thank you very much, Steve, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We appreciate it. As Steve said, really what we're going to center in on is the difference between estate tax planning and legacy planning. And to kind of get everybody on the same page, what we want to talk about real quickly is where we are today with the estate taxes and all the changes that have been happening with the estate tax. You know, in this slide, we really look about all the changes since the original estate tax was enacted back in 1916, all the way up to, as many of you will remember, last year we had no estate tax in 2010 with the reintroduction this year of the estate tax, but at much higher exemptions than we've had in the past. So, we're going to be continuing to deal with a constantly changing estate tax environment. You know, all of the legislation that was extended, the income tax cuts, the capital gains tax cuts, all of that tax regime is set to expire or to sunset in 2 years. So we'll have a big election in November of 2012, and by January 1st, 2013, almost 40% of the Internal Revenue Code is set to sunset. This really creates a challenge for us in the planning community. While we're used to taxes changing, the whole idea that almost 40% of the Internal Revenue Code is basically going to change in 2 years is new and different for us and really creates some challenges. Before we talk about those challenges, let's just recap really quickly where the estate tax is. So today, this year, 2011 and 2012, a single individual in the United States could die with up to $5 million of assets without an estate tax. The top rate is 35% on assets in excess of the $5 million. Now again, that's great if your clients are planning on dying this year or next year, but that's only for 2011 and 2012. Let's talk about some of the other changes that are happening. Generation skipping transfer tax. Remember, that was the tax from a senior generation from grandparents when they transferred assets down to grandchildren and basically skipped a generation in between. In 2010, there was actually no generation skipping tax, but planners weren't real comfortable doing those major transfers, either at lifetime or even at death, because they thought the generation skipping tax might have been reinstated by the end of the year and applied retroactively. Didn't happen, but we really didn't know that till December. Today, the generation skipping tax is again at $5 million. It's the same as the estate tax exemption, and its top bracket is 35%. And again, that's all set to change in 2 years. Lastly, let's talk about the gift tax, because this one is where I think we're seeing some opportunities, and particularly with wealthier clients. And we're going to talk about how they may take advantage of this, but maybe some of the objections they may also raise. The gift tax has never been this high amount of an exemption since it was instituted in 1923. If you remember last year when we had no estate tax regime, the gift tax regime was still limited. The exemption was still limited to $1 million. Now it's set at $5 million. But that is only for 2 years. We really have a 2-year window here at $5 million apiece. So a married couple could conceivably give up to $10 million in assets without paying a gift tax. Well, you know, really what I think is we've got a lot of opportunity here, and I think that we can have a lot of success by merging a lot of this opportunity with our preparation. And part of that is proper planning for clients, helping them understand the shift between estate planning and legacy planning, and then also offering insurance products that not only provide guarantees, but also flexibility in this changing tax code. So let's talk a little bit about what we're hearing on the street from your clients. You know, a lot of what we're hearing is, you know, hey, we're not millionaires. Why would you know about estate taxes? You can die with up to $5 million without paying an estate tax. A married couple could pass $10 million without an estate tax. Why would I talk about estate planning or estate taxes anymore? What else are we hearing on the street? hey, you know, the recession is supposedly over, and we are seeing confidence move up among consumers, but still people are a little hesitant to make major commitments. And so a lot of the feedback or pushback we might get is, well, the economy is so unsettled, let's wait until we see where it all sorts out before, you know, we do any of this kind of planning, before we move forward. And lastly, the one we've heard constantly, whether it being in a changing estate tax environment or not, is I don't want to talk about being dead. And when you come to me to talk about estate planning, the first thing most of our clients think about is death. Not a great lunchtime topic. What we really suggest is that estate planning as we know it may very well be dead. That the old world where we did an estate tax analysis, you know, we might take a client worth $5 or $6 or $7 million and, you know, run an analysis and show how much their family would owe in estate taxes in any particular year, is really not a valid report anymore. I don't know what the estate tax is going to be in 2013, much less 2020 or 2025. We have to change the language. We have to change the way we talk to these clients. And I would suggest that change means we leave the old world of estate planning, which tended to focus so much on estate taxes, and we go to a broader planning regime around legacy planning. And at Transamerica, we've really been talking about legacy planning ever since there was proposals to eliminate the estate tax with the election of George W. Bush. We really have thought that the movement was away from focusing on taxes. Now, taxes, don't get me wrong, are always going to be part of our planning. You know, and some families will feel very confident that they may be subject to the estate tax. But for a lot of our clients, the estate tax will not be the dominant motivator. They need other reasons to engage with us in order to look for planning. And that's where we think we really have an opportunity when we move away from estate planning to legacy planning. When we move that shift away from a tax-focused discussion to really a broader discussion about a family's goals and even their values. And the reason we bring up the values is because it shapes their goals, particularly when you're talking about generational wealth transfers, either to children or to grandchildren. Those values start meaning something. And part of what clients want to hear about and what they want to know is, how can I influence future generations? How can I share some of my values with them even though I'm no longer here? And again, it may not be a discussion that a lot of us are not as comfortable with as doing a solid financial estate analysis. But I do think it's one that's going to open up a lot of business for us. What we found among consumers in our surveys in the last year coming out of this major recession have been they're really looking for three things. One's guarantees. You know, after two major market corrections in a decade, after a brutal recession, the worst since the Great Depression, clients want to see guarantees in their financial products. At the same time, particularly on the insurance side, it's very difficult to offer guarantees in such a low interest rate environment. You've seen a lot of carriers pulling back their guarantees. At Transamerica, we still believe in our guarantees, and we see this as one of the key client drivers in these kind of planning discussions is offering guarantees when we're planning for the future. But at the same time, we're going to provide flexibility. 40% of the Internal Revenue Code is going to go away. Clients need to have flexibility in that plan to deal with what will be a different tax environment in 2 or 3 years. And lastly, all of our clients want control. Most of your wealthy, successful clients, frankly, are control freaks. And we have to show them how they can go through the planning process while they retain control. Let me share with you some recent stats given to us by Business Week. This is actually based on households in 2009. So I expect to see these numbers go up a little bit as we continue to pull out of the recession. But it still kind of gives you a framework about why we want to expand our book of business from, if we stay estate tax centric, is going to limit us to the very wealthy. So I'm really using the kind of terminology that Business Week used in their reporting. So it may not be the same way you would normally apply it, but it will kind of give you a sense of what this market looks like. Business Week told us that for the number of affluent households in this country, households, and this is outside of home equity, that had more than $500,000 in net worth, there was about 12.7 million of those households with an average age of 58. Millionaire households, those between 1 and 5 million, they told us there's 7.8 million at an average age of 62. And lastly, the ultra wealthy, and I think this number is a little bit north of 1 million today, is an average age 67. Now today we're going to focus a little bit on the ultra wealthy, but as we start off here, I want you to think about these millionaire households. I want you to think about them in their book of business, and we're going to talk about what might be some of their hot points and some of the things they might think about in planning. Because really what I want to do is expand your client base. So in my next slide, what I'm really talking about is legacy planning as opposed to pure estate planning. Really should consider households where the mom and dad are over age 50 and likely have north of $2 million in net worth. And I kind of use 2 million because at that point, these families start feeling fairly secure in their retirement assets and start thinking about generational planning for their kids or for their grandkids. And we really have that movement of where we can start talking about legacy planning. And we're going to center in on what their hot buttons are. And in the next slide, we talk about, what is legacy planning? If you ask most people, as opposed to estate planning where it's centered around kind of death or taxes, they think about families, they think about their kids, they think about their grandkids. And I've identified 2 groups to think about, oftentimes that we overlook. One of them is what we call blended families today. That's actually the most common form of family in the United States, is a family where it's a second marriage or a third marriage, and people are bringing assets and children from previous relationships into the current relationship. A lot of times that's been kind of lost in planning. What a great discussion to have about how do you treat his kids, her kids, and our kids fairly, and how do you provide that there won't be hostility in the family relationship once mom and dad are gone. The other one's grandchildren. When you think about it, do you ever have a client that doesn't want to talk about their grandkids ever? What a broad, open topic. When you start talking about grandchildren, these are great prospects for legacy planning. Also talking about special needs planning. This oftentimes gets ignored, and while our slide shows a child here, I want you to think about the environment today where a lot of special needs individuals outlive their parents. And what we're finding is that a lot of the planning by a caregiver, outside of what level of care they may be getting by the state, is by an adult, a brother or sister. Not mom or dad, but by brother or sister. And again, this is an area of planning that they would never think to really talk about in an estate plan. Oh yeah, the state of California is providing X for my brother, but I'm also doing Y. Well, if you're gone, how does brother get Y? And that's part of the plan, the legacy plan that we talk about. Family businesses, a lot of times we've kind of almost looked at these as separate planning. Let's do the business plan, then we'll go do the estate plan. Well, legacy planning, of course, the family business is the most important thing after their family to your client, is their business. How is it going to survive them? Are children active in it? Are they not active in it? And how does that planning impact the next generation? And so it's a little bit of a shift on that business planning to make sure that that number one asset of theirs is done in the legacy plan. Charitable giving, huge, huge part of legacy planning. Charities are very important to clients, and they can do something for those charities. Oftentimes, they don't know that they can do something for them without disinheriting their children. Again, we have a solution that we can bring to the table in a legacy planning environment.